Looky what we have here, boys. Ooh-wee. Yes. The mechatronic is here. Yes. Hi everybody, how are you? My name is Dan Dulac and welcome back to my channel where I am building a V10 powered Ultima Evolution convertible. This is episode number 40, and in the previous 39 episodes we have come a long way. I've had the car at the tuners for the better part of 2 months. As you can see over my shoulder, I do have it back. That should mean some good things. We've got a couple issues we've still got to work through on the electronic side. I did get the mechatronic board. The mechatronic unit from a 2015 Huracan, and we are making some awesome progress on this car. So without further ado, we've got a lot to catch you up on since the last couple of months of my last video, so let's jump right in. All right, let's open this baby up, see what we got here. The box is heavier than I expected. Thought we were only getting a electronic board here, but it feels heavier than that. All right, well, that's a good sign. Let's see what we got. Tire mechatronic unit. Super pumped, finally. 3 weeks, not too bad, 3 weeks to get this thing. So let's bring it over to Mark's, we'll unbox it and take a closer look. Yeah, I have no idea what this thing looks like, what to expect. Yeah, they soaked that thing with oil. Yes. Love it, dude. That's awesome.
But now the question becomes, you know, why? There's a lot of shit we got to figure out in terms of why can't it talk to like the gear selector module and all that.
Yep.
That is all plugged in. So even though that isn't installed in the transmission, shouldn't be doing that.
Open up this package. Another wire harness, this time the chassis wire harness out of a 2015 Huracan. Let's see if we can reverse engineer the transmission electronics. All right, here is the 2015 Huracan chassis wiring harness. And again, I am using this to reverse engineer the gear selector mechanism on the center console as well as the paddle shifters. Again, I'm doing this because I cannot get my hands on the factory wiring diagram. So what I've done here is I'm actually using a parts diagram. This is Eurospares. They actually have a nice, really nice website with pictures of all the parts diagrams. And what I have selected here is the part number for the chassis wire harness. So everything you see here in green is what I have in front of me, with the exception of any of the wires that went back into the engine bay are burned on the harness. I'll show you that in a second. So really from the rear firewall, rearward, I don't have that wiring harness. Don't need it anyway. Really what I care about is this area in here to find out where that center console button or set of buttons for park, reverse, neutral, what that is wiring into some type of module. And then the paddle shifters as well. So again, here is the module I have. This again is in the center console. This is how you put the car into park or reverse, and the manual button that you see here. I have taken this apart. Basically, I took the back cover off so I could get at the electronics. And here is the back cover and the board that comes out of it. So it's a simple connector. It's really 4 wires. This is a 16-pin connector, but it's only 4 wires. And so you can see here is the button for park. This is the button for manual. And then I think depressing either one of these 2 side buttons is reverse. That's when you pull back on this lever comes back. You're basically pushing on these 2 buttons here for reverse. So I just need to figure out, this is not a CAN bus unit, so I think this is just a simple switching circuit. So somewhere upstream, this plugs into a module that does send a CAN bus signal to the transmission ECU. That's what I'm trying to find. I also have the paddle shifter mechanism here. So this is the steering column control module. And the paddle shifting on this is super easy. Basically, all it is this connector right here. There's 3 wires going into it, so 3 pins. I need to figure out where this plugs into as well. So again, this probably goes into some module that takes the signals, the simple switching signals from the paddles, and then translates that into a CAN bus message to the transmission control unit. So I need to find out where that module is and basically reverse engineer, follow the wiring paths from this harness, figure out where those connectors are in this harness, de-loom the harness and follow the wires to where they go, and I should be able to figure out the modules that these plug into. Again, without the factory wiring diagram, this is difficult and I have to go this route. The R8 has a different shifter mechanism that's not going to work anymore. So I'm having to go in here and reverse engineer some of this stuff. Now the cool thing with this image here is I can see basically the larger connectors, the relays, so I can make heads or tails of this harness. So now my mission is just to get this harness spread out, opened up, so I can again start to isolate the couple of connectors and then again reverse engineer using the physical wiring harness the modules I need. Here is where the Huracan, the donor car this came out of. You can see where this harness is burned. This comes out, I believe, on the passenger side, rear firewall back into the engine bay. Again, I don't care, I don't need it. And then this is on the driver's side. This goes into the engine compartment on the driver's side rear firewall. So the rest of the harness is good, but because that's all burned up, I got a super good deal on this harness, pretty cheap considering. Actually cheaper than buying a subscription to the Lamborghini Huracan wiring schematic diagram workshop manual. But in any event, drastic times calls for drastic measures, and we're gonna get this wiring harness unraveled and let's reverse engineer it. I've got this harness completely unwound, untwisted, laid out here using the schematic, the part schematic. I was able to kind of reverse engineer how this lays out and goes in the chassis. So if you can imagine, this area is behind the driver's steering wheel. This area is on the passenger footwell where all the fuses are. This is kind of the center console area, and there's a harness that comes down the center. And then down either side, driver's side to the rear, passenger side to the rear, And I think I found the connector. So remember, this is the transmission switch module in the center console. Here is the connector, 16-pin connector. And I think I actually found it. It's right here. And this slides in and clicks in. Eureka. And I actually looked at the pinouts, and they correspond to what's on the board there as well. So that's the connector. So now what I can do is delume this and figure out, well, where do these wires go? What module, what other plug are they going into? So I can figure out what the CAN bus module is that I will then use in the car to get my transmission to work. So slowly but surely making progress here. A little bit tedious given the situation I'm in, but let's keep going. Let's see if I can find the harness for the paddle shifters, this column. I think I might actually need a different harness. It's the dash harness that plugs into this main harness. I'll figure that out, but we're getting one step closer here. Let's keep it going. So let me talk about what I've actually done here, or what I've had to do, and kind of take you back through the start of all this on why I needed to go this route. So let's first start over here on the car, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so what I have here is the mechatronic for a 2015 Huracan. I still got it kind of in its shipping container in case, just sitting here on the side, and I can plug the harness, the ECU, the transmission ECU, into this mechatronic. Normally it's housed behind this cover plate, this cover box, so ultimately I will have to swap out and replace the R8 mechatronic, which has the immobilizer, to the Huracan, the 2015 Huracan mechatronic, which does not have the immobilizer. So these are interchangeable in this chassis, in this DCT transmission. So I still need to do that, but I've just plugged it in here just to see how the computer reacts. Now, over here on my VCDS software, this is the software I'm using to get access to the computer, the electronics, and so forth. It's simply plugged in via the OBD2 port I've created, again connected to my laptop here. Now the error I get on the computer now is it doesn't recognize the Huracan, or recognizes the Huracan transmission mechatronic, but now it's looking for the Huracan shifter component, the Huracan shift module and paddle shifters. The R8, if you remember, the R8 shifting mechanism is right here. And I was gonna try and just use this temporarily to get going, but now that I've changed out, or will be changing out the mechatronic, it doesn't want to see this anymore. It wants to see the Huracan transmission setup. So you can kind of see where this is going. I'm basically converting, or have already to some extent converted this engine trans package from an R8 to a Huracan. Now there's some good news here, is that the wiring is all the same, as you'll see in a moment. That I've been able to use to my advantage. But the bad news is, now I have to figure out how to make the Huracan transmission module work. So this would be in the center console of a Huracan. This is actually out of a 2015 model. I've taken it apart so that I can reverse engineer the board and the harness plug and so forth. So the first thing I have to do is, if I had the wiring diagram, I could easily look up and see what wires go to what for this harness. Because I don't have the wiring diagram, I decided to pick up a physical, the actual chassis wire harness. But in any event, I needed to trace, first of all, where this guy plugs in, and I found it. This guy plugs right here. So this goes into this module. Then I just traced these wires all the way back through the harness, cut open the harness, and found those wires right here. So these are the wires I'm looking for. Now, obviously there's some colors there, colored wires. Luck would have it is then I looked at the R8 wiring diagram, which I do have, factory wiring diagram. And as luck would have it, that same group of colors is right here. So those wires I just showed you will go into this 14-pin connector, which is in the engine bay that I know of, plug in right here. So that is absolutely brilliant. That just shows the interchangeability that the VW group put into the R8 and Huracan to make manufacturing and reuse of the similar parts in wiring diagram and wiring harnesses. So I've got that. So that is one piece solved for. I know where I need to plug in that center console switch module for the transmission. It goes into these 5 wires right here. The next step is, the other piece to the Huracan shifting is the paddle shifters. This again is from a 2015 Huracan, and what I cared about is the paddle shift mechanism, given that that's how you put the transmission into first gear or neutral, is with the paddles on a Huracan. And so in particular, I'm looking for that wire plug right there, and trace the wires that come out of that plug. And where do those go? And again, because I don't have the wiring diagram, the factory wiring diagram, I am using the physical wiring harness. So what I had to do is locate a factory dash harness. So this is the dash harness out of a Huracan. Pretty short. I got this again used off eBay. I'm hoping to resell this because I'm not going to need it, and resell this actually since I'm not going to need it. But I needed to use it to find out the plug. Now the plug is located right here. This is the plug that goes directly into this module. Right there. That's where it plugs. So I looked up the colors of these wires, and I traced those wires all the way out to this plug right here. So those 3 purple wires in the bottom go to this plug. This plug then connects to the main harness over here. This is the main wiring harness. Again, same wires. Then I trace these wires all the way through the harness. You can see where I dug through the harness to find the wires. They go back into this leg, all the way down, all the way through, and ultimately, wouldn't you know it, they come out exactly in the same loom, the same spot where the center console harness plugs in. So these 3 wires are for the paddle shifters. So then I looked at the wire colors. Luck would have it, those wire colors correspond exactly to the same wire colors here on that 14-pin connector that go to the transmission controller module. So right here, purple yellow and purple red. Shift up, shift down, and then purple black is the ground wire. So since this is the R8 wiring diagram, you could see where this transmission module, the shifter mechanism for the R8, that's 4 wires that simply plugs in 2 wires here and then can high, can low in there. And that's it. That's the only thing that connects the R8 module in here. And you'll see the rest of these were left unused because these are for the Huracan, not the R8. So I obviously won't be using these because I'm converting this to Huracan shifting mechanisms, and I'll be repopulating these wires for the Huracan and not using these here. So pretty cool how, again, from this plug back to the main harness in the engine bay, they left all these wires populated, just terminals unterminated for the various application. So that's it. So I have everything I need now. I have everything I need to plug in those 2 modules so that I can get this transmission to go into gear. Fingers crossed. I'm out of breath. It was a lot of tracing and kind of doing it the hard way without that physical wiring diagram, but I did it. I figured it out. And again, the interchangeability between the R8 and Huracan really helped me out here because I was able to use, at least at the TCU, the transmission controller, the same wire colors apply, which is pretty logical because they're trying to keep costs down with manufacturing of both these models. So they reuse same wire colors, probably even the same harness. They just don't populate some pins in the various connectors. So I'm pretty excited. So I'm going to get to getting these modules wired into my transmission so we can test them out, see if we can get this thing into gear. All right, I've got the loom run, 5 different wires I need to go back to the transmission computer. So that loom runs along there, through the main harness loom, and then comes out right there. So that's what I'll wire into the center console unit, and I've already run the pair of wires for the paddle shifters. So that's already in the harness, so don't have to worry about those. So I'm going to terminate these. We're going to terminate these into the small 20 gauge pins, and then I have to run 5 additional wires back into the engine bay. So let's get on that.
Wish you were mine.
That's it. Plug that in right there. Good. All right, we are good to go. We are wired in here. So off camera, I finished up the loom here, put the sockets on the engine bay side, and then ran wires all the way through back to that 14 connector plug I mentioned. And then at the other end of the loom, I've got the center console reverse park manual buttons all wired in here and plugged into the module. So that's good to go. And then as you saw, I took the paddle shift module off from the console controller. Again, just 3 wires there. And I'm actually thinking, rather than steering wheel mounted paddles, I could 3D print a bracket to make this dash mounted, where the dash is going to go, and then have fixed paddles. I think I like the idea of having fixed paddles better than the ones that are mounted on the wheel. So anyways, might be a cool little thing to reuse these paddles. But anyway, plug that in. It's all wired and ready to go. So first thing we're going to do here is fire up the old computer, and let's see what happens to the computer. See if the computer recognizes these modules now. Let's give it a shot. All right, let's fire up the VCDS software here. And then we're going to turn on the ignition. Not going to start it. I'm just going to turn on the ignition. We are going to select auto trans. All right, let's look for some fault codes here. So I had some previous ones. What I'm actually going to do is clear these codes. You can see this code here. No communication with the gear selector. So that could be legacy. So I'm going to clear these codes first. Clear, yes. Done, go back. I'm actually going to go to the engine controller as well and clear those codes. Fault codes. And clear codes here. Yes. Done, go back. So now I'm going to turn off the ignition and give it a few seconds, and then I'll turn the ignition back on and then just check the codes again. See what happens here. All right, ignition back on. Go to the auto trans. Look for codes. All right, so we still have that no communication with gear selector module. Instrument cluster, gateway, that's fine. That's fine. So there's all these codes here because I'm missing all these modules. All right, so here we go. I was wondering if this was going to be the case, so check out this code. Transmission control module, incorrect software version. So remember, I've got the Huracan mechatronic in there, and it wants to talk to the transmission controller that probably has a newer software version. So Mark mentioned this is probably what's going to happen. I'm going to have to take my transmission controller module over to him, and he can put an older revision of code on there, and then that should take care of that. And I bet that communication with the control module goes away as well. Yeah, the Tiptronic switch, this would be the paddle shifters that are on the R8. He's complaining about not finding those. Well, those don't exist anymore. So anyways, I think that's it. I think we're gonna get this TCU reprogrammed to an older version of code, and I think we'll be good to go. Let me show you what that TCU looks like. I actually got it dangling here. I did not mount it in its permanent location yet because I figured I was gonna have to do this, but here's the transmission control module. So I'll just unplug this. We'll take this over to Mark. He will spin back rev a code revision on there for the 15 Huracan, and we should be to go. So fingers crossed, we'll try that. So guys, that's gonna be it for this video. I made a lot of progress on this. Got a bunch of harness rewired, back rev to the Huracan center console, shift buttons, the paddle shifters. We got it all wired in the right place. Now we just need to get that TCU down revved to an older version of code. And Mark said he could hook me up there. So that's it for now. Hey, stay tuned. I'm really hoping we make some fast progress now. And the next time, hopefully you see me, we will have a functioning transmission, and there's no snow yet. We might actually be able to go-kart this thing down the road. So stay tuned, coming up fast. We'll see y'all guys soon. Take care now. Definitely think I'm gonna have to put an exhaust system on that, a couple mufflers maybe, and I'm actually thinking of doing a valved exhaust on it because that's gonna be super loud.